All right, so the focus seems to be right now, post the health care bill falling out of bed, what now goes back into that bed, whether we could see progress on tax cuts. The House Ways and Means Committee member, Republican Congressman Mike Kelly, joining us now. Congressman, good to have you.
Thank you, Neil.
When I spoke to Kevin Brady, the chairman of the committee last Friday, he was saying, well, it's full steam ahead with the tax cuts. Will it be your committee, sir, that's going to be writing those? And in other words, not a bunch of different ones coming from the White House?
Yeah, I think we've been working on it for a long time, Neil, as you know. So in our blueprint, we outlined pretty basically or broadly what we wanted to do. But I think what we're looking now is where we're going, because we're getting down to rug cutting time, and it's really important now to lay out a plan that makes people think about getting the economy growing again, about making investments that have a great return for the American taxpayer. So I think we look at that. We look at tax cuts as a way to get the economy moving. And I think we look at that now and we say, look, we got to keep moving. I do think, though, our president found out that this is a tough place to do business in, because he negotiated such good faith and tried to help to get it there. I think he's found out right now sometimes you can only take people at their face value, and when they're in front of you, they're going to say one thing, but they're going to do something else behind your back. So important lesson for all of us to learn. I'm from the private sector, as the president is. You know what? It's time to fish or cut bait. Let's move on to the next big thing, and it's about getting America back to work again and getting our economy growing. We can solve a lot of problems by doing that.
The Freedom Caucus itself seems to be much more open to non-revenue neutral tax cuts. In other words, they won't make a huge deal as to whether these things are paid for up front. What do you think of that?
Well, you know, we've talked before about the revenue neutrality, which really makes it limited as to what you can do. I'm a proponent of doing what President Reagan did in '86, and he said, look, one will follow the other. We will have an economy that will rise and it will pay for itself. So I like that type of an approach, especially when you have a turnaround plan that makes sense. It can't happen from long-time Washington politicians. They don't get it. You just don't get it. They'll invest money in things that are foolish in order to get elected, rather than invest money in things that get the economy redirected. So regulations and tax reform, critical, gets people back to work, gets our economy growing again, revenue starts to flow, not by using a whip, but by using a carrot.
All right. Nevertheless, some issues have come up that Republicans are divided on, Congressman, as to whether you pay for this or pay for some of this. And the issue of a border tax has come up. Big retailers don't like that because they think that they're disadvantaged with imports that come into the country, and we're slapping fees on them, and that's going to hurt their sales. And they won't take that very lightly. Are you for a border tax?
No, I'm not, because, you know, I'm an automobile guy. The Maroni label, which is I watched for years on the side of a car, shows not only the equipment on a car and the price of a car, it also shows parts content. And when you look at global parts supplies, you know that they come from all over the world. Sometimes little things built in one part of the world go to big things built in Detroit and everything else. So I always thought that, look at how it's constructed. Just don't go flying off the handle and say, if it's not made here, I'm not buying it. Well, you know what? If that's the truth, you're not going to buy very many things anymore, because it takes a whole world now with that global supply chain to build the finished product. So it's incredible that we understand how things are made, as opposed to just making statements and then going back later on and saying, oh, I didn't really understand that. I said, well, you know what? Get your head out of that place where it's so hard to breathe and look at things, look at it.
Let me then get a sense of what you want to see. If you had your druthers, Congressman, would you make these tax cuts big as they were trumpeted before the whole health care thing went, you know, kablooey? In other words, that you'd take the 7 rates we have now, bring them down to 3. The top rate would be cut to 33%, corporate taxes to at least 20%. Are you still in that camp that you got to go big on these?
Yeah, why wouldn't we go big? I mean, the one thing I can point to in my lifetime is 1986, when we had a president that understood how it worked. And I've talked to Art Laffer a number of times and Stephen Moore. When you understand how things work, when you understand that if you build the right model, you'll get the right result, that's fine. If you just stick to an ideology without having any background in business, and too many people here don't have a background in business, you know, I will tell you this. You better have served some time in the public sector. You better have had your nose bloodied more than once to find out what neighborhoods you don't go into. And when you find a way to get there, go there. Don't try to play games with some kind of ideology that only makes sense in your little neighborhood or your little.
Well, the reason why I asked you that, sir, is we're getting indications of the Treasury Secretary Mnuchin that you know, it might not necessarily be big tax cuts for, let's say, the well-to-do, and that they might not see a big tax cut from this. Are you okay with that?
You know what? We get too divided on who the wealthy are and who the wealthy aren't. My main concern is always going to be the same.
I always think the wealthy should be defined by someone earning $1 more than I am.
Well, unfortunately, that's how envy works, right? You want everybody to do well, just as long as they don't do better than you. But in America, we know what drives our economy. We know what it's always driven our economy.
So you think they should get the big tax cut that's coming to them and not have it sort of balanced out with the cutting back on their deductions or whatever?
It depends how people define balance. I do believe this, that people with money are the people that invest money. I don't want to make it harder for them to invest. I want to make it easier for them to invest. And we know that the history of America has been that those at the top always pull those up with them. I just think we're too divided sometimes. I think it's always about the rich. It's not always about the rich for me. It's always about the successful. And when we can create jobs, as President Reagan said so clearly, it's about jobs, 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 and more jobs. What's good for the American worker is good for America. Why do we have to divide people all the time and say, well, it's the wealthy that get everything? I'll tell you what, every place I've been, there's names on buildings and there's names on places that are charitable, and they're always a name of somebody who was wealthy and invested in his community, her church, her state, whatever. Those are the people that bring you up. You got to have money to contribute. I don't tell you, Neil, how many times, our heart's always willing, but sometimes our wallet's weak. So I just like to see people be successful, people that can start with nothing and actually build a life and build a country and build a community that lasts for generations. And that's what I want to look at right now. I don't like the divisiveness right now of trying to grade people and they're giving on, well, they were just wealthy, that's why they could do it. I'm not that type of person. I just think that whenever we win as a team. We don't win individually. We win as individuals on a team trying to make America great again, not just me great again or you great again.
So you still think you're going to have something ready by the spring and ultimately voted on by August?
Well, I'll tell you what, I think we learned a lesson this past week. Sometimes you can negotiate beyond, and I've said this, I'm in the automobile business. I've sold a lot of cars and trucks, but never to anybody that didn't want to buy a car or a truck. So I think it's time to fish or cut bait. Look, if you're not buying, I'm going to quit trying. Let's just move on to where we can make a sale and can move the ball down the road.
Congressman, pleasure having you. Mike Kelly, Republican from the beautiful state of Pennsylvania. Thank you, sir.